Hello again, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of 15-Minute Free Thinking. How do we overcome existential dread and fear about the future? Often, I suppose existential dread or fears could even be extended into the past, as the past often reflects on what we expect in the future, and our life conditions and our own situations play a large role in how we view the world and our opinions about it. We might be a nihilist that thinks nothing's worth a damn, or we might be complete full-blown optimist that thinks everything has a value and everyone has a purpose, or somewhere in between. Maybe a nihilist that believes we all have a purpose. There's no cut and dry answer to how a person should think or the best way to think for any person. Maybe for an individual life, there is a particular mindset that's more conducive to living a good life where you're at, in your situation. But nobody else can know that. Experts on psychology are a dime a dozen, but when you apply it to the individual, things change. So when I talk about existential dread, and I say, this is how you overcome existential fears, that's a bold statement. And it's one that might lead people to already be on their keyboards saying, you can't. You can't just make a video and tell people how to stop fearing. I completely agree with that. And I think the only way for us to deal with these issues are to talk about them. I made a video a few years back now. I was trying to recall what it was titled, but I believe it was Feelings of Impending Doom and How to Deal with Them. Now that video, unsurprisingly, got a huge response when I look at it in retrospect. Making it, I didn't think much of it. I just remembered times in my life where I was really anxious and it led me to a feeling in my gut that everything was falling apart, everything sucked, and I needed to learn how to overcome that. And in my 30s, I had some serious stressful episodes. I've never been a full-blown, as far as a full-blown, quote, panic attack, I think, maybe once or twice, but I've been able to reel myself in from those fears. And to be honest, in case I forget this in the future, as a cannabis smoker of 30 years now, 33 years, it took me a couple decades to admit that high doses of cannabis can actually increase that feeling of existential dread immensely in a lot of people, especially if you're taking hashish or eating edibles. And that's very hard to dispute. There are some people out there who have never experienced that from cannabis, but a vast majority of people under high doses of cannabis, especially when it's unexpected, can have almost an overnight psychotic break. And I've seen it happen through psychedelics as well. And so drugs are the first thing to look at. If a person is depressed, anxious, having this existential crisis in their life, often that can be due to substance use, and that's something that needs to be looked at first and foremost, along with diet. I mean, diet comes, of course, first, but drug use can severely impact people's mental states. But not eating the right foods, if a person's just eating McDonald's all the time and drinking soda and they're wondering why they feel like crap, these things can cascade and compound into complete feelings of dread. I know in my own history, the times when I haven't been taking care of my body and my mind, I've felt crappy about it, even if I wasn't even self-aware. And on a side note there, a lot of addictions people have, especially with some of the heavier substances like heroin and, amphetamines, especially amphetamines. If people are doing meth, they don't realize how ridiculous they're acting. They don't realize they're causing their own problems. It tricks your mind into thinking things are okay. And so dealing with that issue is completely separate from, this video is dealing with people who don't have serious substance abuse issues, who have a reasonable diet, get enough sleep, all the things that we know help us to remain in a good state of mind and healthy. If everything is covered and you're still feeling crappy, that's when it's time to look at what we can do in our own lives. And something I wrote a while back I was going to read to you here. It's just kind of a little synopsis of one fraction of this this topic, but it says, Stress or anxiety, and they're not interchangeable, but I would say stress is often the pressure that's put upon someone, and anxiety is the result. But it's right, semantics, etymology, words. But stress or anxiety is neither a diagnosis nor an actual condition. In other words, stress is not a diagnosis nor a medical condition by itself. It is rather a side effect of a physical or emotional issue in need of resolution within the individual or family or group. And that's an important note. It's not always the individual. It can be our surroundings and environment. Most often, it is resolved through a conscious awareness of the problem and worked through if possible. If one cannot mitigate the issue through working through it in conscious awareness, the only solution is acceptance and humility and being able to laugh at the situation. Very important, humor is. In either case, moving forward and starting anew each day without dwelling in the past is the only path to overcome our existential anxiety. And I firmly believe that. I think that one of the most crucial things we can do is our own mental alchemy to change the outcome of things through how we view them. Now, shit's complicated. I have tried to uncomplicate my discussions over the years. I try to minimize my use of big words, if you will. The word existential itself, existential crisis, is a crisis of existence. It's often when you realize, oh, I'm going to die someday. The things people don't want to talk about, they consider them dark. Yet in some cultures, death is celebrated and revered. It's difficult to work with stress or anxiety as a topic because there are so many reasons why people worry. There are people who have faced adversity, they've faced abuse, and they've lost their limbs. Maybe they're in a wheelchair their whole life or they're blind, yet they have some of the most positive attitudes you've ever heard. And then you hear about some millionaire who lost his millions and took his own life because he was stressed out. And you wonder, well, obviously stress isn't related, it's not universally related to any particular situation. It's all mental. It's all how you handle it. And therefore, mental alchemy really is changing lead to gold. And from my discoveries reading the occult and alchemy was that in the end, most, people looking for the philosopher's stone find that they had it the whole time. It was never a material object because nobody needs gold when they've found how to change their bad thoughts into good thoughts. They find they always had what they needed. And even if you had all the gold in the world, it wouldn't make you happier. That's the epiphany people have, I suppose. So our existential dread can be dealt with. And I want to make a little side tangent here about lockdowns and COVID. I think that lockdowns turned out to be one of the greatest things that ever happened, especially to the U.S. I think that they were, it's been the evidence that the data that's come out on lockdowns has shown that it has less than a 1% real change because people were indoors with each other and they should have been allowed to go outdoors and explore. They were much less likely to get ill outdoors. That's neither here nor there, but all the arguments about how lockdowns cost jobs and lives, didn't allow people to go to hospitals for real problems, all this is true. And it probably cost a lot of lives. However, it gave one moment of silence for the world to sit at home and think about their lives and what they really wanted out of it. For some people, that was a travesty. They hated it. But thinking back on it, my wife was forced to take time off. She was a server. What did we do? We loaded up our school bus and we traveled up into the mountains and we went up to Mount St. Helens and went to the beach and we traveled and explored and spent a lot of family time. And the funniest thing I heard this morning was somebody was talking about how there's a lot of like Reddit posts and feeds where people are talking about how they're nostalgic for the early lockdowns or early 2020. And I understood what they meant because for a lot of people, that was the only time they've really had to sit and think, spend time with family. Somebody brought up banana bread and frothy coffee. It cracked me up because these were these trends and these fads that everybody got into. Certain dances, certain coffee types, or baking food at home. And it gave people the most important thing, the greatest gift that they could ever be given, which was time to think and to really ponder what life's about. Because often, even if we're doing well, we're making good money at our job, we have a home, we're still stressed out, we're still anxious, we can't figure out why. Well, it has almost everything to do with our lifestyle maybe not being where we really want to be. I mean, we survive, but my family wants to move. We want a farm, we want some acreage, and that's something we're working to attain. And I know that can be more stressful in its own right, but when you're working towards something you want, even if you don't have it, it's a good feeling, and it can take away from that stress. And if you're stressed out at your job, I guarantee you'd probably be more stressed out if you didn't have it. Not just because of the money aspect, but because we want to function and be productive. We want to get up and be able to do something in our day. And as a guy who's worked for myself a lot, it's hard to motivate some days. You wake up and you just, oh, do I have to work today? But I was going to do a completely separate video here and a full discussion about the lockdowns. I'm definitely not saying it was a good thing. I remember people were unable to go visit their loved ones. They couldn't go to funerals, gatherings, parties, weddings, and people were fired for choosing, to not take the shot. Kids were forced to mask up in schools, even kids who couldn't read teachers' faces, who had learning disabilities. It was just a really gross time. There was a ton of stress. There was fighting online, a lot of loss of reputation from certain doctors and scientists, and a lot of experts turned out to be bought off, and coerced language, changed different definitions in the dictionary. All these problems, these all really happened. But still, I see that silver lining, which was we were able to think for a little while. There was a little time to breathe. Even literally in some places, like in China, where the air cleared up for the first time, and they could see farther than they'd seen in decades through the smog. We live in a very fast-paced, dog-eat-dog, quote, productive world. Progress is at all costs, what we're constantly forced to believe, that when you're born into this world, once you're out there in the world and you're 18, you better get your shit together, you better get a good job, and you better keep climbing that ladder. You better improve. And we all want to improve. I mean, can't blame people, but comparing ourselves to others or comparing ourselves to what we think we should have, the old saying, I think it was Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer, right? I think it was Tom Sawyer. Why did I say Huckleberry Finn? That's funny. That comparison is the thief of joy. Maybe it was someone else. I hate attributing quotes to people because it's always someone else, but comparison is the thief of joy. And it's true. If you compare yourself to others, then it'll take away the joy of what you do have. Don't worry about the next guy. However, there is one time when there's an exception to that rule I've found, and that is when you compare yourself to those who have less than you. It can be very eye-opening to see how much other people suffer and how they make it work, and that we don't have room to really complain or stress. Often when you realize your problems and you acknowledge them, your anxiety can melt away. I think this is why psychedelic therapy is so useful for people, because they have these knots in their mind, these metaphoric knots where they've tied up memories and repressed things. I mean, it's very literal almost in the way that our brains handle things, pushing things down, not dealing with them. And when you have a psychedelic experience, often those can flood out if you feel comfortable talking, and then you realize, this is what I need to do. And you can change your whole life and overcome your fear. And often that existential dread isn't due to a person losing a job or even having health problems or any family problems or losing a loved one or anything else. It's really rooted in that fear of death. Mortality. The reason why the wealthiest of us have always spent, billions of dollars trying to not just look younger, but, products that will make them younger. There are research on the telomeres on our, which are these tails on our chromosomes, which as they shrink, we get older and we age and we die. And they've found that they can stop these telomeres from shrinking on mice and make them live like 3 times longer. My thought is, I'm not interested in that. My existential dread isn't about how long I live. It's about how I live and the people that I surround myself with. And I'll say, I've made mistakes. I've wasted time. A lot of us have. I think a lot of our fears and our anxiety comes from not even the things that may come in the future or even what's happening now, but looking back and saying, oh my God, the time's going by so damn fast and I haven't got any of the things done I wanted to do. And it can seem even more important for those who wanted a family and they're getting older and they feel like the clock's ticking. But even for those who have, I should have started a business, or I should have done this or that, or I should have been nicer to this person, or made more friends, or not trusted this guy, or, the list of things we coulda, shoulda, woulda goes on. We have to completely set that aside, because the fear of the unknown is a pointless fear. The fear of the past is even dumber. And I think one of the keys to living happily without these types of dread and these kind of fear attacks coming on is to have no expectations. And I don't mean we can't expect people to act a certain way or behave a certain way or be respectful, but have no expectations. For example, when you go on vacation, make a general plan and just let shit fall into place. A lot of people out there are control freaks, and they're not always bad people or people who want to harm others or control even others, but just people who are so desperate to be in control of their own lives, they have no control in other realms, so they find a way to control other people or in control of a situation. Sometimes you just got to let them have it. In fact, some of the control freaks are great leaders, and I just let them do their thing. But as long as they're doing their thing well, fine. But having no expectations of people or situations can allow us not to be stressed when things don't go our way. And a fear of loss of control, nobody has control. Anything can happen. So no fear, be strong. It's really that simple. And it's not something that you can do overnight. It's not something you can read a book about. It's just something that I can talk to you about, others can talk to you about, and we can talk to each other about, and eventually convince ourselves, because it takes practice and a willful effort to want to be better for ourselves and to feel more content, because every day wasted in stress is a day that we could have been happy. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your time. This video is available on YouTube, on my channel Carpo719, and also on my 15-minute free thinking podcast on Spotify, Apple, whatever else. I don't have any sponsors, nor do I do ads, and therefore anybody who would love to contribute, I'm eternally grateful to my patrons on Patreon at Carpo719, and I will be uploading a few more of these in days to come, because I have kind of a backlog of podcasts I need to share here, and I guess I'd really like to focus this year more on trying to discuss topics of self-help without being pretentious and arrogant, because I'm not a guru. I'm just a person who wants to teach the things that I've learned without seeming like I'm acting like a teacher or that I know what's best psychologically. I've spent a lot of years studying these different self-help techniques and mental control for myself, but every time I share them, it feels like one of those idiots who's telling you, you just got to think, positive. It doesn't work that way. No, it takes a lot of consistent hard work and daily affirmations to ourselves. So with that said, I wish you luck on your journeys, and I will talk to you next time. Peace.